know in the chat box what's happy. Thank you, Rita.
Hello.
Hi, Lily.
Yes, here in Kenya, we've had a prolonged period of drought, but in the last week or two, some parts, including where I am, there's been rain. And now we are happy. It is bringing us a lot of hope.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Thank you for sharing, Lily. What about others? What's making you happy recently, or what's brought you joy? Feel free to unmute and share, or share it in the chat box. We'd love to hear.
And before that, before you go on, last week we were celebrating International Women's Day. I think we still have that euphoria going on. We're still feeling happy and, almost extended. Yeah. So it brought a lot of joy. See very many women coming up with the good things they've come up with, what they have achieved, the achievements. It was very encouraging.
That is very heartening to hear. Thank you for sharing. Great. Anybody else, please feel free to pop it in the chat box or unmute and share. Welcome to Karen for joining us. A couple more people have joined. Dickon is here. Great. Glad to have everybody here today. So as you're sharing that in the chat box, I'll just get started with the next small bits for us. So the session overview for today, we just did the group check-in. We'll do a little bit of quick housekeeping and then a review of last week. And then we'll dive deep into the prevention strategies in today's session. And then, as usual, we'll have a bit of interactive group work, and we'll end with sharing the take-home exercise for the week. So for the housekeeping, I won't spend a lot of time on this because we are in the 5th session. You all are very familiar with this by now. But yeah, keep your video on if you can. We want to be mindful of the different contexts and cultures and spaces that we're all coming from. And do remember to step up and step back. So keeping that in mind, especially while you're in your groups. And also, please sign in for session 5. Rita requests if you can share the attendance link in the chat box. We also request you to share your assignments in PowerPoint template if you aren't already. Most folks are, so thank you already for doing that. Rita shared in the chat box the link for the attendance. And also just reading, Tabile, lovely to hear that your son is much better now. So glad to hear that. Now, just a review of last week. We looked at the causes of violence in detail. So you had Rita and Vinita with you last Wednesday to go deep into that. And for the take-home exercise last week, we had requested you all to look at the data you had gathered either in the first session or other violence prevalence data from your context, and look at a particular kind of violence that happens, and then analyze the risk factors and the protective factors at different levels, and what possible strategies could you use to address those risk factors. So based on that assignment, we loved, thank you so much to everybody who shared their assignments, and we had a very interesting time reviewing them and learned a lot from you. We want to invite today Natasha to share her assignment and the context that she's coming from and how and what she thought. So Natasha, over to you. Just requesting if we can do a quick overview of your assignment and just take maybe 2 or 3 minutes at most. We'll share these slides in detail with everybody after the session for you all to see. But for now, just requesting a quick overview as we have a long session today. So over to you, Natasha.
Thank you so much, Rubina. Thanks to everyone. So the topic that I wanted to cover, from the background of working with the refugee women, not only the women, also the refugees with the disability, because my primary concern was to discuss about the refugees with disabilities who are living in the camp, and the context was in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar-based refugee camps. So when I started initiating this one, I mean, discussing about how the refugees with disabilities are having legal accessibility, because yeah, physically challenged, they do have their dimension of having the legal accessibility, because at least they can speak and they can have the information being assisted by someone, either by the caregiver or the parents, or in some of the cases, their assisting devices. But what about the people who are the hearing and the speech impaired? And that was the question. That was my concern to discuss about in this whole discussion. So in terms of interviewing the people who were the hearing and the speech impaired, it was quite difficult, because first of all, you need to know sign languages have different sort of dimensions. I mean, there will be some sort of dimensions in terms of the regional context, like we do have our language context based dimension, like some are colloquial, like some are regional, some are really urban or semi-urban. These are the things. Same, it goes for not same, like almost same, it goes for the sign language. So it was quite difficult for me and for my interviewers, and also the people who we were talking to understand about the Rohingya sign language. It's entirely different, because when you are in a difficult and in a crisis moment, you make something or you invent something that only you and where you are surrounded by those people can understand, and those people can communicate with you, not us. In terms of that, we started talking to them in the local dialect. Those people who are working at those camps, they can understand that one. So we started talking to their caregivers. So basically, in terms of understanding the whole dimensions of the violences, the people who are living in the camp, especially targeting the hearing the speech impaired people and all types of hearing and speech impaired people, the dimensions regarding the violences are not different, but the approaches, the intervention, the risk factors are entirely different, because it's about whether you are going to provide them the home delivery. The home delivery, this time I wanted to use here, because when the people who are requiring those accesses and they can't go there, so what are you going to do? Either you have to serve them or you need to make a special mechanism. So lastly, I want to sum it up with a new concept. Probably, I wanted to initiate some sort of experimentation. So we provided some of the boxes in some of the targeted beneficiaries who does need those kind of legal access. So we made understand to their caregivers or the parents, look, these are the pictures. Those pictures were inspired with some sort of information of sexual violences or like sexual harassment, especially child protection is quite vulnerable, who are the speech and hearing impaired, and you can't protect them like that. So when we showed those parents and those caregivers, they agreed, okay, we will put the tick mark if something happened like this, even though it was quite difficult to make it understand, because sometimes those boxes were requested by the kids to get, because they thought that these are the fancy boxes, why don't we have it for playing? But somehow we ignored the situation. In the end of the research, what we could figure out, like, it didn't help us that much. But I think this is the time we need to think about and revise the issues regarding the legal access and the support for the vulnerables who are most vulnerable among the vulnerables. So these were the experience and the risk factors, and in terms of connecting the societal, the interpersonal, and also the being an individual, and also the communities and how those are affecting. You are being quiet and not being able to go to report where you should have those sort of facilities. And thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing this, Natasha, and it's very, very interesting to hear about your work. Natasha, for everybody else, had sent a very detailed assignment. So I would strongly encourage everyone that after the session today, please do look at the slides that are available on the Learning Lab. We'll also share them in the email after the session. So please do look at these in depth, and maybe we can follow up on the discussion board, or if we have time in the next session, and learn more from Natasha about her work and experiences, or if you all have any questions or thoughts. I would now request Rita to please help us look at the key messages from the last session and take the session today forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Rubina, and thanks, Natasha, for that reflection you shared with in your homework. It's really important to see how we analyze the risk factors, and the way you really unpacked it at the different levels of the socio-ecological model was really amazing. And we got many other answers that are interesting. I wish everybody, we had like a pack where everybody will look at each one's assignment and then learn from it. Yeah, like we will never stop sharing that. We are here to learn, so we know you're bringing a wealth of experience, and thank you for agreeing to share with us. So we'll share these key messages, and I'm sure these are a few. You may have picked some. Feel free to share in the chat box if any other things stood up for you. But here are some that we picked from the last session that Benita co-facilitated. So we saw that, it doesn't have one cause. There's no single cause to violence. And there are multiples. And another thing that we saw, they are interrelated. And I think we went through that. And then in your work, in the group work, you were able to share how you see them interrelated. So it is important for us, as we shared, to understand the risk factors that increase the likelihood of violence occurring. All right, we said we introduced the word likelihood, because it's not that every time there is a risk there will be violence, but what are those risks that increase the likelihood of violence to occur? Okay, and also understand the protective factors that decrease there are some protective factors that decrease that likelihood of violence to occur. All right, and that's why we wanted you to unpack and see what are the risks and what are the protective factors. We also looked very quickly at the situational triggers. Again, as we said, there could be some risks of violence to occur, but not every time it ends up being, a possibility. So we wanted you to know that there are some triggers that can precipitate or, make the violence occur when it is not there is a risk existing, but when something happens, it kind of sparks that fire, that violence to happen. That's what we meant by situational triggers, and those are many as we unpack them. So together, these factors can help us understand how to prevent violence. Remember, we are doing this for violence prevention purposes. Okay, so the socio-ecological model that we shared is a useful tool to map these factors, like Natasha did, like all of you did in your take-home exercise. So it is most useful when it is specific, like Benita focused on last time, looking at one specific form of violence in one specific setting, and being clear about the age, circumstances of the individual, including whether these focus on a perpetration or victimization. You remember we said this can be a risk as we were mapping the risk. We said it could be a risk of a woman to experience violence, like to suffer from violence, but it could be a risk of a man being a perpetrator. So to be able to unpack that and see whether it is risk for perpetration or victimization is really key. Okay. So if you have anything that you picked, please put it in the chat, but those are a few of the points that we wanted to highlight again. Okay, now let's see how the course overview looks now that we are at our 5th session. Thank you for sticking with us. We are on session 5. We'll be looking at the prevention strategy, and we went from the beginning. We introduced the nature of violence. We talked about the what and why. We went into the principles. And last week was really critical because we wanted to understand the causes so we can find solution. Now, part of the solution, as I believe, we have the prevention strategies, okay? So this is a key session again, like all the others. And then next week, we'll be looking ahead. What is next after we have done this together? All right. Okay, like we said, this is session 5 of our course, and we're doing prevention strategies. I know we have many strategies that we are able to share today. And here are some of the objectives that we want to reach today. It would be great if by the end of the session today, we are able to explain key prevention strategies that have shown to be effective at reducing violence against women. So we'll be looking at those that we know, we have evidence for, that they have been able to reduce violence against women. It's also our objective to identify prevention strategies that can address specific risk factors. So we've mapped the risk factors. Now being clear of a risk factor, what is the strategy that can help, that can address that specific risk factor? That's another objective. And then we want to analyze which prevention strategies might be most appropriate for a specific context and why. You remember, we always said, yes, we are doing programming, but context is really key, and we need to be able to bring it back to the context where our work is. Okay. All right. On the next slide now, let's go into the prevention strategies. And I want to start with what does the term prevention strategy mean to you? Okay, give example, if possible, in the chat box. What does the term means? And then give certain of the examples that some of the examples that you know of prevention strategies in your work, in your context, those you've read about. Please feel free to share in the chat. We want to learn from you as well. When you hear the term prevention strategy, what comes to your mind? It doesn't have to be, a sophisticated or a fully framed term. You can have your way of understanding what does it mean to you. I'm checking the chat. Okay, nothing is coming from the time being, but please, as you think about it, let us know in the chat what comes to your mind. Okay. Yes, scheduling awareness raising sessions. Yeah, thank you, Shan, for sharing. That is a strategy. Great. Strengthening community prevention, community mobilization. Great. Thank you, Dickens and Adrian. Absolutely. GBV awareness campaign. Wonderful. These are the strategies that we are used to seeing, to know of. So today we'll be looking at a number of different program types, strategies that have, been shown to be effective to reduce levels of violence. So, and we will make sure that we look at some in different contexts, okay? Not in only one context. I can see the strategies coming, yes. So we'll be looking at those program types or the strategies that have been shown to be able to reduce levels of violence in different settings, okay? And we'll be happy to hear from you. So, like we've been saying from the beginning, what we share is mostly what we have evidence for, okay? Don't feel like there are some that we are neglecting. So the prevention strategies focus on IPV, at least what we'll be sharing today, as this is what for now, we have the most evidence for, up to date. So, and if you get more, we'll keep, as our objective at the Prevention Collaborative is to keep the field informed. We'll be updating what we have. But what we share today is what we have experience and evidence for today. So I would like to add that you understand that this is not an exhaustive list, and there is need to continue as we are developing the field to innovate some of the new strategies that arise depending on the different contexts. A few years ago, we were not thinking that there would be something like COVID, and during COVID, people continued working. Maybe sometimes we'll have evidence of some of the strategies, for example, that have been developed during the pandemic to address the risks that maybe have changed their, and then address that. So for now, we share what we have, but we keep in mind that there is need for innovation. Okay? All right, I'll go ahead and mute Gathel. Yeah. Please stay muted, Gathel. Okay. All right, so let's start with the positive thinking here. I like this slide because it starts with the positive thinking. We say prevention is possible. Who agrees with me? By a show of hand, a yes in the chat. Please let us know if you believe prevention is possible. I'm not seeing reactions. Yes, Hassan, you believe it. Yes, Hassan believes it's possible. Yes, Dickens. That's a positive thinking we all need to have. Sylvia said yes. Yeah, we believe prevention is possible. Okay. So over the last 2 decades, a range of programs to prevent violence against women have been developed and tested. Okay, remember we're talking about, testing and knowing what works. While no single program has been reported to prevent violence entirely, various interventions have proven effective at reducing it. Okay, and this is measured by the decreases in experiences of violence by women and the perpetration of violence by men. This is how it is measured. Okay, so we know that no program has come and said no violence anymore after this program, but at least some of them have shown to be really working to reduce considerably. So different organizations and, have put in place, have worked on different frameworks, such as the RESPECT framework, as you're seeing here, developed at the World Health Organization and UN Women. And this is, we have a lot of documentation on this on our Knowledge Hub. And this is a full framework that has been picked and used by different people. So this framework developed by the UN Women and the World Health Organization use different ways to categorize violence against women, prevention programs. So these are the way they categorize them, depending on the types of violence these address, who they engage with, and how they work. Okay, that's how you are seeing like how many strategies that we have here. 5, 6, 7. All right. So relation skills strengthened, depending on whether they are working at relationship level, empowerment of women. We'll look at that later. Services ensured. How are we giving services to the victims of violence? Reducing poverty, environment made safe. You remember when we looked at the principles and talked about how it is important to keep women and girls safe as we program. Looking at adolescent and child abuse, prevention, and most importantly, as I can note, transforming attitude, beliefs, and norms. So those are the categorization. You may have some other strategies that are beyond that, okay? And feel free to share as we move, and if you see them, if you use them in your work and you'd like to share with us, okay? And please feel free to stop me if you have any point you want to raise, and then we'll be ready to hear from you. Okay, so again, the socio-ecological model is our flagship tool. We are going, we looked at the mapping the risks and mapping the protective factors at the different levels. Here, we're going to be talking about what are these strategies and where are they able to intervene in an effective way. So we mapped some prevention strategies on this socio-ecological model to show the primary levels each strategy uses as an entry point to reduce violence. So see where it is mapped as an entry point, okay? At individual level, let's start with the inner part of the socio-ecological model. So at individual level, prevention strategies include addressing individuals' harmful alcohol use, for example, fostering women and girls' social and economic empowerment, a very important strategy, and using economic transfers to reduce household poverty and economic tension that we know can be the risk, you remember mapping them. Okay. Now, at interpersonal level, we have couples or parenting programs working with groups of men and women, following participatory curricula designed to foster critical reflection. When we work with these people, encouraging that they really analyze how they are relating with each other, what are their, behavior, what are the power kind of balance between them, all those things. At interpersonal level, this really comes strongly. And also, we aim at building relationship skills and shift attitudes, behavior over time. We say over time because it's not a one-time thing. So you can see that both economic transfer and these are working at this interpersonal level. All right. So we also look at the community level, the third layer. So at community level, we see programs that work to foster new positive norms around gender and combating violence against women through community mobilization and edutainment. We have edutainment here as another key strategy. So at community level, and you remember we said they can be intervening at an entry point, but doesn't prevent them from intervening at another level, another layer of the socio-ecological model that we have. So last but not least, we have the society level. So at society level, we have programs focusing on enacting or improving laws that discriminate against women. I know we talked about this when we were at the beginning and mapping who can we work with. And we also explained part of the strategy. Why do we think it's important also to do some organizational capacity development? We're targeting this at society level. Programs focus on that enacting of or improving of the laws that are existing and those laws discriminating against women, okay? We have in different contexts, different laws. In our context, like some other, maybe global South context or African context, if I can say, we have laws that on marriage, for example, on divorce or inheritance rights that really discriminate against women and girls, and we see those. So at society level, we focus on those, okay? And several strategies are more, if you look at this slide, you can see that there are different strategies that are mapped to more than one level, and this is color-coded. You can see the different colors. This has to do with the specifics of the intervention. For example, can be addressing harmful alcohol use, and that can be done at the individual level, and regulation of, laws related to alcohol. Let's say, don't sell alcohol to children under this age. And that can be seen at the community level or even at society level when we talk about laws. So it can be a strategy that intervenes at different levels and targeting different individuals. I hope that is okay and clearly good. Okay, so let's see what is on the next slide. We're talking about how then can we succeed at doing this violence against women prevention. Okay, so the wheel that we have here, we see that across multiple settings, program types are mapped and different, and the same ingredients that make it possible keep coming, okay? So here I will not really dwell on this. As you can see on this wheel, we have what are these very key we talked about the principles. In the middle or at the center, we have the principles that we detailed, but these principles are upholding all these other, effective strategies that are really working to see violence reduced. And here, instead of talking about it, I'd rather invite you to stay tuned because we'll be having a next cohort for our full course on how to succeed at VAP prevention, and we'll be letting you know when it is starting. It's starting, I think, May or June, I think. So we'll be sending out the application for you if you be interested to look at it. But just looking at what is this program that can be effective? What are those characteristics? Already just giving you a test, the program will have to be intentional, it will have to be aspirational, it has to get enough exposure, it has to be interactive, and mostly also be transformative. We're seeking to transform attitudes, behavior, and norms. Okay. All right. Any question and any reflection before we move forward? Because we're now going to be looking at the specific prevention strategies that we prepared for you today. Okay. If you have any question, if you have any idea you want to share, please raise your hand or put in the chat, and then we'll let you, we'll give you a few minutes to share. Okay. So the very first strategy I want to start with, so like we said, we mapped a few, not really all of them. So the first one I want to start with is addressing poor mental health. Do we think it's important? Can people just to make sure that we are together, can people say in the chat or show of hand, do we think it's a strategy that is important? Does it even matter, addressing poor mental health? Does it have something to do with yes, let's see, Priano. Yes, Shan. It has something to do with violence. Okay, so we need a strategy around that. So poor mental health, yes, Natasha, most important one, I agree. So poor mental health is recognized as a risk factor for violence against women and girls, you know, and consequences, and it is also recognized as a consequence. I want us to catch this. It is a risk factor, but it can also be the consequence of violence against women and girls. Some people will agree with me, I know, on this. So conversely, mental health interventions show striking potential to strengthen violence prevention and warrant that integration into prevention programming. So we know that it can be a risk, it can be a consequence, but also we know that these interventions, you know, on poor mental health show potential to strengthen violence prevention, VAW prevention, okay? So violence prevention programming, if you can click, Rubina, put some clicks. Okay, great. So violence prevention programming strengthens mental health and vice versa. I think we agree on that. You're doing violence prevention programming, you are strengthening people's mental health. And a strong or healthy mental health can also be a good way to prevent that violence. You are preventing violence because you are healthy mentally. So violence prevention efforts can have positive impacts on women and children's mental health, even without specific mental health treatment. Who agrees with me on that? So where we manage to prevent violence, where there is no violence, this can have a positive impact on these women and children mental health, even without like specific activities, specific mental health treatment. Okay. All right, no worries, Hasna. It's okay, it happens. We'll catch you up after the session. So empathy, self-esteem, emotional regulation, resilience, and stress management can be critical protective factors to prevent violence. You remember we said that, yes, there can be some risks, but if you have enough and strong protective factors, you may not be a victim of violence, okay? That's why we're saying if you have that strong mental health, you may be standing still and be able to face a condition that would have made you a victim and not experience that violence. Even when violence against women, prevention reduces mental health problems, even when that prevention reduces the problems, women may still have or may require treatment. So here I want us to agree on something. We're not saying that by doing just prevention, we don't need to go ahead and provide the services, okay? So we are not really trying to underscore the services to address the psychological and mental health impacts of violence. So prevention projects that we are talking about here needs to ensure that there is staff safety, for example, like you see, and there are strategies to prevent and respond to vicarious trauma. You remember when we talked about the principles, we said, let's start with ourselves. As people who are there out working with people who suffer violence, how does it impact us? Okay, so we need to have like those specific activities that help even those staff to stay safe, all right? Okay, so evidence, we have evidence, and the evidence exists about low-cost programs. Before we even get to that slide, we have evidence of low-cost program to address poor mental health, okay? So we know that there are some interventions that are done by, lay providers in some low, income countries and middle income countries. And these can successfully reduce depression, for example. They can reduce anxiety and trauma-related symptoms. Integrating those strategies in our programming will strengthen our violence prevention programs. So here we are just suggesting that if we have access to those, strategies that can be not really too much costly, but that can be integrated in our programming and help us strengthen the prevention interventions, we'll be ready to take that, okay? So I want us to look, sorry, anyone wants to say something? Okay, I think that's that. If you feel like you want to say something, please put your hand up. I'll be able to see and unmute yourself. All right, so I want us to look at those few, one of the example that we have here. Yes, Rubina, if you can click, and then we can look at the CETA. So here we have the CETA, which is Common Element Treatment Approach, okay? This is an approach that has been developed and implemented and tried in Zambia. And for this specific approach, program people worked with couples who had existing violence and alcohol problems, and they trained and supervised lay people in the community to deliver some counseling sessions. They didn't go for psychologists. They didn't go for really trained and very experienced people. They just selected some people in their communities, trained them, and help them, supervise and mentor them to deliver those counseling sessions to couple. Okay, so the integrated treatment model designed to address violence, it is designed initially, and I'm gonna look for the CETA brief and put it in the chat so you can read it. I know we cannot finish everything in this session, but here on our website, you will see the details of the CETA program, Common Element Treatment Approach. And this program in Zambia has really, it got to really good results. Like in 8 of the 10 couples for the 8 and 10, the couples that went through 8 to 10 sessions of this counseling that they were given by the lay people, they were able to reduce violence, as you will see with the result on the next slide. So this is one of those examples, like we were saying, if you go to the next slide, to show the results. So we can get results even if we don't use the very sophisticated, no experienced professionals, but lay people who delivered counseling. And I think we have a webinar that we go. If you visit our website and go through the webinars, people who delivered this model came to talk to us and gave us how it worked, told us how it worked. Okay, so as you can see with CETA, where there was intervention, there was reduction in number of women who reported recent IPV of 53%. This is a huge achievement. If you can reduce violence to 53% reduction, you really getting really good results. And you can see that women who reported sexual violence, it also reduced at a bigger number, even 56%. And also, if you see the reduction in the alcohol use, you can see that among men, 62% of reduction, and among women, 52% of reduction. This is CETA, and you can read more, like I put in the chat. Please read the program brief and know more about this, and watch the recording of the webinar we had with CETA people. Any question before we move to the next strategy? Any question, comment, feel free to put in the chat. And again, we will share all these resources for your further information. You have the program example, you have the brief, and this is, I think, is gonna be useful for us. Okay. No question. Please feel free to put any reflection in the chat and we'll be able to talk about that. Another strategy that we want to discuss today is economic transfers. Anyone here use that in their programming? Okay, thanks, Cipriano, if it was clear. Anyone here is familiar with this strategy, economic transfers? Hey, people from Kenya. I've heard a lot about this in Kenya. So if with a yes or a thumb up, if you've used that strategy. Okay. So for what do we have for economic transfer? We know that if you go to the next slide, Rubina. Okay, yeah. The economic transfers, it's not necessarily, thank you, Cipriano, it's not necessarily giving women employment. We're going to look what it is exactly. Actually, it is giving transfer directly money for living to families that are in economic vulnerable conditions. Okay, it is a little bit different from that one, but we'll talk about that empowerment largely later. Okay, Cipriano. And if it can give them employment, if the money that we give them can, that they are given, sorry, can give them opportunity to open small businesses, then it can be related to that. Okay, Cipriano. I hope you get clear as we go. Yes, yes. Absolutely, Sylvia. So women and children in poor households, we know, face increased risk of violence. Okay, so I don't know about you, but in some of the contexts, when people are poor, really, violence, you know, although we don't really make an excuse to say that poverty is a direct cause, is necessarily a cause, but it can be a risk. Remember, it takes a risk, it takes a trigger, it takes, you know, a lot of condition to do that. Yeah, I can see, Alfred, you did cash transfer to household during COVID because you knew people were suffering from that. So women and children in poor households face increased risk of violence, and unequal gender relation and rigid gender norms position women and their children in that financial dependency on men, and make men feel, on the other side, make men feel solely responsible for providing economically for the family. And you see that situation, all right? And what can be the power dynamics in that context? And we know how power, unequal power relation is at the key of violence that we see. Okay, at the center, I mean. When a man is unwilling or unable to meet this expectation, conflict and recriminations can result from this situation. We know that. And people who have been working with men, they understand how they've been complaining that I'm not seeing men enough because I cannot provide for my family. So this is a complex situation, but we are just trying to unpack and show how the less resources or not having resources at all can be a risk for women and children to experience violence. So some men may respond violently as a way to overcome those feelings of inadequacy and reassert you know, the authority in the family. You see how it becomes a risk then, okay? So like Cipriano was saying, I mean, if we try to kind of define, we'll say that economic transfers are regular payment of money or goods in nature made to individuals or families, and often these are done by government. I haven't heard of any, even if there may be some organizations that give goods, but governments have been taking care of these. So economic transfer, what does it do? How does it help then? So economic transfers reduce intimate partner violence. And this is, I mean, it does reduce. I mean, there is fact that it has been reducing that, and I will be sharing some of the resources where we've seen these working. While we generally, I mean, what they are not generally designed specifically to be able to address the types of violence, these economic transfers that we've been seeing, like the programs, appear to be reducing the violence in many settings. And I think it's really links to what we just described. How can it be a risk, you know, especially when the transfers are predictable and they are ongoing in a given period until the family is able to sustain themselves, and also are of a sufficient size. We will not say that I've given a family food for one day and say that this is a really consistent economic transfer that can reduce the violence. So they need to be predictable, know what is needed there. They need to be ongoing, and they need to be of a considerable and sufficient size. So transfer reduce IPV through some pathways that you see here. We've picked 3 of the pathways where economic transfers can reduce IPV. First, improving the economic security and emotional well-being of the household, right? We know how emotional well-being is important to reduce or to avoid violence. Second, reducing conflict between adult family members. There is a saying in Kinyarwanda, where I live, that says, if you don't have anything to share, like those who share nothing, like you don't have anything to share, you call each other stingy, you quarrel. So this is where, when we are giving to families some money, some goods, we are reducing conflict between adult family members. We avoid blaming men for not being breadwinners. We avoid children to be suffering from that violence they see. So it also, like there is the last point, I mean, it increases women's empowerment. We know that, and we've seen in some of the programs. So if you wanted to read more, I think I have a brief here that I can share in the chat for your further reference and reading more about the cash transfers and IPV. We have a brief on our website. And again, I want us to note something, that reducing poverty and economic security are key strategies under recognized frameworks like respect, the one that I said, I mentioned earlier, the UN Women one and WHO, and also another one, the United Nations strategy to reduce violence against children. Some people may be familiar with that, Inspire. We have that also a little bit on our website. You can read more. Okay. So I wanted to pause a little bit and say, do you have any question before we continue? Any question, any comment? I can see in the chat, Cipriano, you say in Timor-Leste, government just provides cash to pregnant women in economic. That's also a strategy, yes. So they are targeting, you remember we said, we cannot program for everyone at one time, but we can target that population that is at most risk and be able to program for them. Maybe the government there targeted the pregnant women because they were seeing that there is higher risk of them experiencing violence if they didn't have that support. Thank you so much for sharing, Cipriano. Okay, so can we move, please? We're still on economic transfer, right? So just to talk about a program review, we've reviewed some of the programs that have done economic transfer, and we're going to share a little bit here with you. Yes, I'll come to the questions. Sorry, Dickens. Attend as much as you can and let us know if you can support. So cash transfers to poor households reduce intimate partner violence in over 70%, okay, of the 22 rigorous quantitative and qualitative studies reviewed. So here we had a review of a number of programs, 22 here, and in all the 22, it is the economic transfer has reduced at 70%, you know, IPV, intimate partner violence. So within the quantitative evidence, reductions are strongest for physical and sexual violence, sexual IPV, while the evidence is less clear for other types of abuse. Here, if we talk about other types of abuse, for example, we have emotional IPV, controlling behaviors from men to women. We don't have like a clear number on that, but on physical and sexual IPV, it has reduced to 70%, which is a huge, number of reduction. Even small reduction in IPV achieved through individual programs may be meaningful. We don't need to neglect this, okay? Someone was saying, one woman, one child saved from violence is a great achievement. And I totally agree with them. Although we know we have to do to impact, like largely impact people who are suffering violence. So for us, if we know there is really a spread of violence, we may not be able to do our work at scale, but if we can do something to reduce violence, at least at one individual, that will be an achievement, okay? So we need to be thinking, cost effectiveness, about cash transfers. Are we able to do that? How is the scalability? And be thinking about that as program people. So here we know it is important and it's a good strategy, but we still have some questions, all right? We have outstanding questions, as you can see. So program design, for example, program design and framing are potentially important to program impact. The way we design a program and the way we frame our program are really key. They are potentially important. Design issues could include whether the program provides cash directly to women. If we're talking about economic transfers, are we thinking of giving cash directly to women? Is it safe for them? Is it helping? Those are the questions we still have. Whether messaging around the transfer directly challenges gender norms, but because remember, yes, we want to be doing that economic transfer, but are we, as we give the messages with that transfer, are we giving messages there that challenge the gender norms that we know are at the center of those inequalities, those imbalances that create violence, okay? Do we ask ourselves whether the program will have some activities on top of that? So many questions are still outstanding, but we're just flagging them there so we can keep reflecting on that, okay? And we still acknowledge that we need research to further understand how economic transfers can effectively be helping us to reduce violence against women and girls. All right, so next, let's, of course, we have different resources that you can go ahead and read and inform. I'm gonna put them in here, but we also make sure that we are sharing as we send the follow-up emails to you. Okay, please feel free to stop me and let me know if you need clarification on something. Okay, now we've done the mental health the economic transfer. Now let's look at the strategy, the next strategy, which is community mobilization. I think this is one is really common and most of us have used it. And I've seen that in the chat when we started. What do we have for community mobilization? Why do we think it is important? Have you used that? Is it a strategy you're familiar with? Please put in the chat or show of hand if you've used that and if you felt it helped to reduce violence. I would like us to keep interacting. Okay. Anyone used this in their work? Is it something that you saw reducing violence against women and girls? Yes, Sylvia has used it. Thank you, Sylvia, for sharing. Okay, great. So who do you work with when doing community mobilization? Who do you work with? Just feel free to put in the chat. Don't really feel like constrained to see what we put on the slides, but who else do you work with? All right. So as we're saying here, community mobilization engages entire community rather than just individuals. All right. And we've mapped that. Yes, within the community, there are individuals. And that's why we said strategies can be used at different levels of the socio-ecological model. All right. But here we want to focus on the fact that it engages entire communities. All right. To achieve population level impact, this approach typically engages volunteers, community activists who are trained and supported in informal activities to engage the communities where they live. Okay, I can see that, Sylvia, you've used that with local leaders, community-based facilitators. Great, you've worked with those. Absolutely, these are key people you can work with. Okay, so to achieve that impact again, this strategy often involves working with service providers and with key religious, traditional opinion leaders, exactly like Sylvia was saying. And Dickens, I know in Stepping Stones also you've used the community action cycle. Absolutely. So community leaders, as Guadabawa is saying, community influencers, youth leaders, women group. So you can see that's why we started saying it engages, the entire community. No one is left, because we know violence occurs at the different levels. So we need to engage all those different levels, okay? So the evidence is mixed on the effectiveness of community mobilization. I guess this is not a great news, but we need to talk the reality. So the evidence is mixed on the effectiveness of community mobilization program in reducing violence against women. So rigorous trials from, again, we are talking about low and middle income countries, show that community mobilization can be effective in reducing violence against women, shifting underlying social norms, and empowering women within programmatic time frame. So some programs will be like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So we have a mix of evidence on that, but we know that it has worked to shift underlying social norms, these social norms that push violence to happen. However, we have evidence also. We know that from other community, mobilization intervention have had no impact. That's, it's a reality. So now, I don't know, maybe later we'll talk about, was it well done? Was it not? What are the missing things? But it is a reality that not every time community mobilization have worked to reduce violence. So this suggests, in other words, that impact on safety and well-being depends on implementation quality and context. And I know we'll later talk about that. We'll really talk about what is the role of a good implementation to have a good impact. Okay. All right. So let's move and see what I can call like an example of a community mobilization that most of us will know of. On the next slide, community mobilization. Let's talk about SASA. Anyone not familiar with SASA here? Can I see by show of hand, or are you familiar with SASA? Have you heard about SASA? A yes or a thumb up will do. Yes, yes. Okay, I drank no. Okay. All right, we have a couple of yeses, heard about it, never used it. Okay, yes. Cocosa in Timor-Leste, yes, Cipriano, I know about that. You're doing the adaptation of SASA and it's Cocosa. I hope it's going well. Yes, it was implemented by TAF. Thank you. Cipriano, maybe in your group will be able to share about your people. It doesn't matter. We have resources about SASA. We have a brief, and I'm gonna quickly put it in the chat, and you can access those from our website. But in the meantime, let's see. So SASA is a holistic community mobilization approach designed to catalyze community-led change in norms and behaviors within which actually make gender inequality to continue and violence against women to continue. SASA, as you can see, SASA trains and mentors community activists who lead informal activities. You remember earlier on, we were talking about not necessarily having experienced people, but working with people you find in the community, lay community members, helping them to understand, train them, and mentor them to deliver activities. SASA actually uses the same approach. It trains and mentors community activists who lead informal activities. Example, having conversations where they live in their, through games, have discussions on some posters, they're really visual within their existing networks, okay? They know where violence happens, they know who is at most risk of perpetration or victimization, and they know who they target and know who they go to discuss with. And the aim is for, they go and foster discussion, and the discussions are not done for randomly. They want to motivate the critical thinking. How do you reflect on your own way of relating to the other person? And there is this notion of power, that is really key when you're doing SASA. Power relations, how are you using your power? So I will not really dwell on this power, this SASA approach. What is important here to note is the exposure. So the SASA activities that people are exposed to get the results that we'll be looking at. So it has to be repeatedly in a daily life to be exposed to those activities. They have to be using multiple strategies. Some people are visual, some people like to listen to stories, some people are open to sharing, but this just, for 3 years, the community members are exposed to those activities, and this is fostering regularly their critical thinking and their thinking of how they use their power, either negatively or positively. You'll be able to read more about SASA there. But just wanted to share some of the numbers here. The results of SASA are really impressive, and the evaluation that has been conducted have shown that percentage of women and men who believe physical violence against partner is not acceptable after being exposed to SASA, like this, what we call community SASA, are 76%. They say, no, it doesn't have to happen, okay? And look at the opposite number in control communities where they were not exposed to SASA. So this is great achievement. And we all, those who know SASA would say it's a great model, it's important. But I wanted just to flag that, yes, SASA has been working for years. I cannot remember when it started, sorry. But recently, SASA has been revised to do SASA together, which kind of, there was a big component, for example, of HIV in SASA, which is no longer the focus of the SASA together. And there is a shift in now engaging couples rather than working with these individuals in the specific settings. So watch out for here we share what we have evidence for. The SASA together hasn't been evaluated yet. Maybe once it is evaluated and we have results, we'll be able to share. Okay, keep an eye to our website for updated. All right, very quickly, I'm just trying to be cautious of time, but I think we are okay. Rubina, please put a message to me. Yeah, noted.
Very good, Rita.
Okay, good. So Tabile noted about the network. Sorry, keep coming as much as you can, and you'll be able to catch up with the recording. All right, so our next strategy, community mobilization. All right, I will go ahead again and put in. I know it's a lot to be sharing in one session. Sorry if I'm rushing, and feel free to stop me, but I keep sending in the chat resources that you can use to understand better, and feel free again to come back for a discussion. All right. Okay, so now we talked about community mobilization. Let's talk about couples programs, programming with couples. Anyone here has done work with couples? Please put in the chat a yes, or feel free to put a thumb up. I want to make sure that we are still together. Yes, not yet, Cipriano. Okay, good to know. Hopefully you can get something here that triggers your envy to work with couples. Okay, so program couples. Lan has used it. Thank you, Lan. So mostly these are programs that are done to promote healthy relationship in order to reduce violence. Simply put, promoting healthy relationship among couples in order to reduce violence. Yeah, so couple programs, here are a few points that we put together. So they focus on the unequal power relationship conflict, poor communication that can be drivers of violence, and they unpack that and they suggest alternatives to how they can be done in a healthier way. They work with both members of a couple, of course, a couple to promote healthy relationship, and they are group-based. Okay, when we're talking about couple programming here, we're not talking about going to see one group, one couple. Okay, group-based and follow participatory curriculum. You have the evidence suggests that those that worked really, they had at least 10 sessions, between 10 and 20 sessions. Some of them have gone beyond. We'll talk about one example that has worked and has been tested. Okay, you have the couples go through a number of workshops, and some of the sessions in those workshops, they'll be done with all the members of the couples, like men and women together, but some specific sessions, depending on the topics being discussed, they'll be done by with women and men separately. So what they do is they really emphasize critical reflection about the gender roles and norms, about building knowledge and skills for healthy relationship. There is one step people go through, understanding, reflecting on themselves and how they are relating to gender roles, how they are relating with their partner in terms of the power, how they share power, what are those norms that can, precipitate the violence. And they reflect personally as individuals, but they also offered a way of reflecting now as a couple. How can we do things differently? And this is important because now they suggest skills. We used to have some of the programming that just say this is not how we should do things, but not giving alternatives. So here, by knowledge and skills for healthy nonviolent relation, the couple programming are giving options. They are giving alternatives to how they can relate, how they can do things differently. All right, and we'll be looking at examples. All right. Okay. All right, so couples program have resulted in large reduction in intimate partner violence among participants. We know there are some programs that were not including women. They will be working with men, thinking that these are the most important population to work with because they are at the risk of perpetration. But now working with couple has shown reduction in intimate partner violence. Remember, we're showing what we have evidence for, okay? Because they foster change processes at the couple level, because they directly address risk to intimate partner violence. You know, they sit in sessions, we'll talk about that later, and they start getting alternatives on how they can communicate better and communicate and talk through conflicts in a non-violent ways, okay? We have, you know, here we suggest what it takes to do the couple programming. What does it take? We need to be having a strong design and implementation. We'll be really coming back to implementation. Yes, there is a strong design. And as we talk about design, remember to go back to the earlier sessions where we talked about the key principles that need actually to be observed throughout our programming, from design to evaluation, okay? A strong design, careful monitoring of unexpected harmful outcomes to be able to address them as they come. Planning for referral. Remember, we said, yes, you may be working with women, flagging that they have services, but what are the existing services? It will be so weird to be talking about services that are not existing. It will be weird to talk about services and say we are referring the women there when we know those services are not working. Reason why there is this institutional capacity development. So here I'm trying to be linking the previous sessions to what we're doing today, okay? And another element that we need to be careful with is that selection of training facilitators of the sessions. We talked about between 10 to 20 workshops, but who are those people who are facilitating, okay? What is their not only knowledge, ethics, all the different things that we need to look at. And I think maybe you can know more from the how to succeed, actually. But now for the time being, maybe I wanted to flag that working with couples for several, in many of the programs that we know, focusing on couples had also reduced, you know, violence that children are experiencing. Okay, they have reduced harsh corporal punishment on children. There is great potential then to incorporate additional content and skills around nonviolence parenting into couple program and to measure both intimate partner violence and violence against children. I think this is what we added after we've seen that some programs working with couples have seen an impact, a positive impact on children's well-being, and now went back and intentionally included programming some sessions on positive parenting. I wanted to flag that as we work with couples. Okay, so I will go quickly through this example. And again, know that couple programming, working with couple, is a part of the Respect and Inspire frameworks that are known to have influenced most of the programming. Okay. Okay. So let's go through this example very quickly. Maybe you people have heard about Indashikirwa. We have a full page on Indashikirwa on our website, and feel free to visit and copy the links as I'm posting, and you can get more information on how it works. So quickly talking about the Indashikirwa. So at the design of Indashikirwa, first of all, a background, this Indashikirwa program, it's a program that has been developed and implemented in Rwanda, but it was building on some existing programs. So it built on Journeys of Transformation curriculum. Many people may know it, but for those who don't know, this JOT was like a set of 17 sessions that men were taken through to kind of try to transform their negative masculinities in order to be supporting women who were part of an economic empowerment program. So having JOT on one side and the economic empowerment program on the other side, they realized a kind of quick assessment, realized that even when men were going through the JOT and trying to transform their masculinities, it wasn't really transforming the relationship level, the change at relationship level, okay? So Indashikigwa built on that, and the JOT, part of it, of course, they decided they wanted to be with couples rather than taking the journey of transformation with one partner of the couple. But they said, after couples will be taken through these workshops, how are we going to multiply our impact? And they said, let's do community mobilization as one component. And they drew from SASA. And SASA, they did the Indashikigwa community activist. That was not SASA, but was drawing a lot from SASA. Okay, and the emphasis on that was building on skills to manage IPV, address power inequalities, the benefit of nonviolence and gender equality, just showing that. Okay, so here is what we have in Indashikigwa. So Indashikigwa had 21 sessions where couples were taken through, 21 sessions at a pace of 1 session a week, going through foundational concepts of power and gender, rights, managing drivers of IPV, gender household roles, healthy relationship, sexuality, everything. And toward the end, talking about introducing activism and providing empowering responses to those who are experiencing violence, okay? So those 21 sessions were given or delivered by really experienced, skilled, and trained facilitators who also had continuous support. And then the content on power was really something that they focused on, because on the JOT, where it started, they were not really focusing on power, okay? So they also had some take-home assignment to go and reflect. So each topic they will be discussing in class, in workshop, they will have a week to go and take home exercise. And most of them were practical exercises, including asking them to do practical things. If you want to communicate, how are you communicating? If you want to promote, like to help, to support your wife, what specific activities are you going to do this week? And they will be coming to report. That was a good example of working with couple. We have other examples. And I just wanted to go to the next slide that shows very quickly. We'll quickly skip through that, Rubina. So what are the results of Indashikigwa? So Indashikigwa, those who participated in the couples curriculum, here I'm showing the results of the participation in the couple curriculum, not results of Indashikigwa plus community activism, okay? So there is this part that shows they had 55 reduction in IPV, intimate partner violence, reduced at 55%. This is an important figure that we need to take care of, we need to think about. There was also some other reductions of, risk factors and consequences of violence, like depression, like I said, child witnessing violence, although it wasn't intentionally designed to do programming for positive parenting, or it reduced children witnessing violence. Another figure here, the couple communication was increased to 76%. Here it is, maybe you may say, what does it have to do? So unhealthy communication has been shown, like at least in the context of Rwanda, to be one of the causes of violence. And here it was a whole set of skills, even helping people to understand how do you communicate in a healthier way. And that has shown that it increased communication among couples, and that has resulted into reduction of the intimate partner violence, and mostly including, the beating, physical violence, and also economic violence, because mostly they realized they were not communicating on how to take action, to take to jointly decide on the economic management side of their household. Okay, I guess we need okay, I'm a few slides away. Any question? Let me check in the chat. Any idea, any question in the chat? Okay. So I haven't seen many people who worked with couples, programming with couples, but maybe this Indashikirwa, and if you read, there are other examples of working with couples that you can have from our Knowledge Hub that can help you understand how you can better or you can work with couples. Okay, I want very quickly, I mean, we've heard about Indashikirwa. The next slide is now, yes, there is this model. We've got strategies with those models, but what about beyond those models? What does it tell us? We have good models, and how can we make sure that they work to prevent violence? Okay, the next two slides are talking about, okay, no problem, Alfred. I will talk about these, it's a kind of, giving, like strengthening, thinking beyond the model. Yes, there is that part of the model, like I was saying, but if you wanted to think beyond the model, what does it take to be successful? Does it have to be like a good model that has worked? And here on the slide, we are kind of showing you a comparison of this model that we are talking about that has worked in Indashikirwa. There's version 1.0, and there was an adaptation of that same in the same country, implemented by the same organizations, but which showed slightly different, not slightly, opposite results. So that's why we need to think beyond the model. There's a model, there is how it is implemented, and that impacts the way it gives you the results, okay? Very quickly through this comparison, this Indashikirwa, like we said, had the 21 sessions with couples, and it has shown the reduction of violence, as you see. There was a consistent impact on other intervening variables. But on the same adaptation in the same country by same organization, it's slightly with a little bit of modification because it included one session on positive parenting and others, very slight modification, but it has shown that instead of reducing violence, it increased violence, okay? So this leaves us to wonder, does it only take a model to be successful? So it even showed greater increase among the members of Village Saving Loans Associations, VSLA members, who were not selected to participate. See, there are some that were selected and others. And we have some webinars that talked about Indashikirwa. You can listen and know more. So it is important to know that you can have a good model that has proven to work, but if you adapt, what does it take to make sure that you get to the success of the success you are expecting from that model? Okay, so here the table, I will not go through the whole table, and you can go back and we send the document for you to check what are the comparison. Here there is the component, and then the Indashikirwa first, original model, and the one that was an adaptation, and be mindful that it was in the same context of Rwanda, okay? So see things like, the group size. You can see that for Indashikirwa had 15 couples, and they had 20 and sometimes 25. So think about the group size, think about the facilitation and the facilitators' experience and recruitment. You can see that there is a huge difference on experience. You can see that there is practice, like what did it take? I mean, the training of facilitators, the support that they got, as the project was from the beginning to the end. You can see that there were like some, differences between the way it was implemented by the people who adapted and used the model, okay? So please check this table, see the analysis, because it's gonna help us understand why those differences matter, and like the title, the head, the slide was suggesting beyond the program. What is beyond the program model? Does it only take a model? Does it go beyond that and look into all these components and how they are succinctly, they follow? What is the fidelity to the model? And we also have a fidelity brief on Indashikigwa that you can see what it takes to do Indashikigwa in a good way. Very last slide from me. Sorry, I've been speaking for long. I want to talk about this tool that we recently developed at the Prevention Collaborative. And this actually is like a follow-up of what we were being saying, okay? The program model actually is what we usually focus on when we are talking about effective programs. Am I wrong or right? So when you talk about a program, we focusing on a program, okay? We're taking a program, we know of a program that would work, and we focus on that, all right? And that program, when we want to make sure that we succeed, here is a tool just to make a quick analysis. If you want to succeed, at the Prevention Collaborative, we developed this tool, and I think it was really motivated by what happened with this program we just developed, all right? And I wanted us to go, just a quick explanation of this prevention triad. So the program model includes specific programs, and this can be, if you see like the corner, which side? Okay, the left corner, there is a program model. And the program model could be, a specific program, SASA, Indashikigwa, Program P, Cohort, whatever you call it. It can include the curriculum, the materials, the content, mechanisms, the theory of change. All those make the program model, okay? You need to make sure you have a strong one, you have a good one. And the original structure and delivery mechanism of the sessions, the frequency, all that constitute that corner program model. However, as we see from the Indashikigwa examples that we show here, there are additional factors that are also crucial to success. I think you agree on me with that. Can I see in the chat, what are those additional factors that can help you be successful beyond having a good model? Can I just see a few words in the chat? Anything else that you feel like you have a model, but what are those additional? Feel free to share, please. Okay. All right, maybe you'll share as we go. So there is this important thing, which is being fit to context and population. All right, including similarities and differences to original context. You're picking a model from a different context, you make sure you domesticate, you adapt it to your context and population. Population age, you remember we talked about even risk being mapped at the level of population. Okay, at the level, mapped on age and everything that we saw. Context, it has to be really grounded in a context that you understand. Different contexts may make a model that has worked in one context, not work in another context. This is the analysis. Here we are on the top corner of the prevention triad. Context and population. Fit to context and fit to population when you're thinking of a model and to adapt it. We're also thinking about implementation quality, which the table really unpacked clearly. What are the plans and execution for rollout of the program? This can include number of sessions, timing, sequencing, training. I think you can get more of this into details with the House to Succeed, but these are the things to show you that implementation quality is key. You can have a good model, but if you miss on those things, like even timing, the sequencing, training supervision, support of the facilitators, etc., ability to make changes that needed, Indashikigwa had ability to adjust. After pre-testing, are you able to adjust things? Okay. And finally, at the center of this triangle, prevention triad, there should be organizational capacity and commitment. Are the leadership committed? are the leaders committed? Do you have a strong and committed leadership? Organizational readiness and capacity. Do you have the capacity, resources? Okay, capacity in its wide term. Power dynamics within and outside the organization. If your facilitator, your project person does not have the power to do something on field, that could impact the way you get the results. Adequate resourcing, time and budget. Do you have the budget? Do you want to do Kokotsa or SASA and you want to do it for 1 year? It will not work, okay? So I think with this prevention triad, what I wanted to do, whenever you think of a program, and especially when you want to adapt and do a program in your context, you need to be having that kind of analysis, making sure that, yes, I have the program and it's in my context, it can work, and I've made the appropriate adaptation, and I ensure that there is quality of implementation. Okay, that was such a long talk from my side. Any question? Any question before we go very quickly into our group work? Hello? Rubina, can you tell me if you hear me? Can people hear me?
I can, Nita.
Oh my God, this. Okay, Cipriano, you can hear me. All right, any question? Yes, Gadabawa, a question, and then we can go quickly into our group work.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rita. I just want to ask, in the couples program, what is the difference between the Indashikiri and this other one and the Banda Behero? Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So a very quick response to that, Gwadabawa. Indashikirwa is a couple program, and it worked to promote a healthy relationship among couples. And as I was saying, it had also an impact on the well-being of children. I'll just make that quick difference. Bandebereho, it is a couple program, but with a focus on parenting, okay? It really focused on positive parenting. It worked with young couples that are expecting to get children, and it focuses really on promoting that healthy relationship, but with a very strong focus on how they are going to be promoting the healthy parenting. Okay, so both work with couples, yes, but for, well, I don't want to say very different purposes, because in Indashikirwa, the component of parenting is not the key focus, although it had a positive impact, and intentionally, as they were adapting, added some a session on parenting. Whereas the Bandebereho has specific sessions on parenting and promoting that healthy and communication, but a joint kind of engagement into positive parenting. Does it answer your question, Gadabawa?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and please feel free to read more, because in Dashiki, well, for Bandebero, they have even done a 5-year follow-up to see the long-term impact of the intervention. So we have those on our website, and we can send the resources for you to be able to read further and get more adequate info. Any other question? Okay. Can I take the silence as a no? Is that clear at least? So we move quickly knowing that we got it. That was a lot. So many strategies to think about in 1.5 hours. But please read further. And if you have any question, come back to us. Okay. So for the breakout, I think we can have a quick one today. So what we want to do for the breakout is, again, to go further and just analyze, have a thinking in our group. Okay, we are bringing back the socio-ecological model to remind you. And if you can either screenshot or look at it from the previous sessions. we want you to be referring to the social ecological model. And from there, we will be putting you into different groups. I'll put the link in the chat in a moment. And we want you to go in your groups and make a kind of a quick analysis, okay? So we can just see we are deepening. So we look at the different strategies we looked at: poor mental health, community mobilization, working with couples, and other. We'll be in 4 groups. And in your groups, we want you to be able to say, what levels of socio-ecological model does this strategy influence? So that socio-ecological model that we looked at, yes, I'll come back to you. So you look at the specific strategy we developed today, we talked about today. If it's poor mental health, what level of the socio-ecological model does this influence, okay? And which risk factor does this strategy address? If you can be able to just map out, just a quick analysis. Even if you haven't worked at that on such a strategy, we'd like you to think about what risk factors that this strategy address. Which actors need to be engaged in this strategy as you work, if you decide to pick it, and what challenges might there be in implementing this strategy. Okay, so those 3 things. First of all, you'll have to say what levels, which level, if it's 1, what levels, and you write it. And then later on, you tell us in detail the risk factors, actors, and the challenges. So I've put in the chat the link to the group work. I'll suggest you open it before we send you to the groups. Rubina, do we have the groups ready? Okay, Rubina will be sending us to the groups, and then please click on the link and see whether you can access it. And we'd like you to, if you are in group 1, if you name the groups, that's fine, Rubina. Okay, so we'll find yourself in, and you have the different slides where you can capture a few notes, and we come back and reflect to that.
Great. Hi, welcome back, everybody. We hope you had an interesting discussion in your groups. And sorry about the tight time. We're a bit tight on time today for the session. So requesting if everybody can stay with us for a few more minutes as we go through the sharing from everyone's breakout rooms, and close with the take-home exercise for the day. So thank you so much for your energy and patience today. I want to start quickly by inviting group 1, who looked at the addressing poor mental health strategy. If someone from group 1 can quickly just give us an overview about what you discussed, maybe just 1 or 2 minutes at most. So inviting group 1, please.
Okay, I'll present for group 1.
Sure.
We looked at poor mental health and focused on the individual and community in the ecological model. We identified risk factors like genetic history that can increase, especially when there's a family history of mental illness, this can increase the risk of developing mental health disorder. We also identified exposure to traumatic events such as abuse, neglect, or violence that can increase the risk of developing mental health. And environment, that is at the individual level. At the community level, we identified poor environment, like living in an environment with poor air quality or noise pollution or other environmental factors can increase the risk of mental health. And and also lack of social support, especially social isolation, can also increase the feelings of loneliness that can contribute to poor mental health. The actors that we identified to be engaged in these strategies were several. To name a few, the professional health workers are part of the healthcare providers who can offer preventive services such as mental health screenings and provide evidence-based treatments of mental health disorders. And also community, under community, we identified religious leaders and opinion leaders that can support, that can create a supportive environment to promote mental health, such as organizing maybe mental health awareness campaigns, or providing access to mental health resources, or creating opportunity for social engagement. It's the challenges that might be experienced while implementing this strategy is stigma. Like we discussed that as much as there is efforts to reduce stigma around mental health, it can still be a barrier to seeking help and implementing mental health programs. And also access to resources. Mental health can be very expensive, and communities like who live in rural and underserved areas might not have access mental health resources, such as counseling services and medication. And also what we did put there because of time was a limited workforce. We have a shortage of mental health professionals, particularly in some areas. So this can also make it difficult to provide adequate services. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Karen and Group 1. Just quickly inviting if anyone else has any thoughts about this strategy or anything more to add to what Group 1 has done. Any thoughts on maybe if there are other levels of the socio-ecological model that are also influenced with this strategy? Okay, thank you so much again to Group 1. Now inviting Group 2, who looked at economic transfers, to please quickly share what you discussed, and if you can just summarize your thoughts on this, please.
Thank you very much. I will present on behalf of the group. So we're looking at what risk factors that does this strategy address? IPV and violence against children, HIV, STD related violence, and women, those ones who had been historically left behind. Those are the risk factors, and the reason we're addressing to put down what we call gender-based violence, because they'd been left historically behind. So who are the actors engaged in this strategy? Which actors need to engage in this strategy? So like the government, women entrepreneurs, couples, children, the youth. I think the youth, because of lack of time, we didn't do that, and persons with disabilities and the senior citizens. So what are the challenges that might do in implementing here? So some of the challenges is because of the gender-based violence. Sometimes we are doing what? We are putting up, we are trying to address that, but it is becoming like now, if we are to transfer money to women, the men, there is that danger of them taking money by force from them again, and things like those. So economic transfers, families appear to, I cannot read this. Can you read that? Families appear to go on with intimate partner violence, like I said. So it has, and again, sustainability can be a problem, because some of these economic transfers, it's supposed to be kind of a revolving fund, and sometimes some of the people who benefit from it may fail to refund some of the cash. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Lily and Group 2.
And if there is anyone else in my group to add, that is it. Thank you. You're welcome. Or any other person elsewhere.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lily. And inviting others if you have any other thoughts on this. I think definitely a lot of challenges with this strategy. We have seen conflicting evidence as well, but there is definitely some evidence to show that it works in certain contexts. Any other thoughts or experiences that anyone has had with this kind of strategy, or if you'd like to add anything? Okay, now inviting group 3 then, who looked at the community mobilization strategy. So anyone from group 3, would you please volunteer to share what you discussed? Any volunteers from group 3?
Yes, Rubina.
Go ahead, Cipriano.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's the what we discussed in the group 3. We discussed about community mobilization in terms of socio-ecological model and how this strategy influences from the individual level and the community level. So we see that risk factors that we address is the community misuse of power from the community level, from the individual level, men or intimate partner. Many of them are still aggressive and still following their violent behavior culturally. So which really risk young women in the community itself. So we run outreach, we run program in the community. We involve actors like community leaders because we know that community leaders can influence the people and visit family household. They are close to the community. If any issues happen to young women, how they can call police or vulnerable protection unit. We also engage community activists as a volunteer, so they can also influence the family couples programs. I don't really understand couples programs, but someone was talking about couples programs, which is one of the strategy we use. We also use community itself as a tool. We conducting conversation, dialogue amongst the community itself. Challenges we see in this case is that a lack of awareness from the community itself. As many people, when we go or we approach them, they say, "I don't care." They just leave us. That's one of the challenges we see. And individual level in the community, and that can result to because community, if they show negative behavior or negative attitude or example, then that will lead to another person or young people to imitate and being violent against the women in the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cipriano in group 3, and I think you've covered a lot in terms of who would be engaged, what challenges there might be. So thank you so much. Also inviting others to please use the chat box, or if you'd like to unmute and share any other additional comments or thoughts on any of these 3 strategies. We also, since there were only 3 groups, we didn't get a chance to look at the couples program strategy in great detail. But if anyone has any quick thoughts on that, which risk factors might this address, which actors need to be a part of it, what challenges might there be in the strategy, please do feel free to add in the chat box. or if anyone would like to unmute and share. Okay, no worries. I'll just then a big thank you to all the groups. We will share this link with you again in the emails if you'd like to go back to it, look at it, look at what the other groups have done. Please do feel free. I'll now just share the take-home exercise with everybody so that we can head towards closing the day. Just give me a second. Okay. Is everyone able to see the screen?
Yeah, I can see from here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cipriano. Just give me a second while I reach the slide. Okay, so for this week's take-home exercise, we'd invite all of you to choose a prevention strategy that you think would be effective in your context. So this can be some of the ones that we've shared today, so the 4 that we went into detail with, or you can explore more strategies at our Knowledge Hub. We'll also share this link with you in an email. And Rita, if you don't mind popping that in the chat box, please. And after you look at these strategies, figure out like what would work best in your context, who's the community that you're working with, what issue do you want to address, and look at it from all those angles that Rita had shared earlier. So select the strategy that you think would be effective, and then answer the following reflection questions. First, pop in the strategy, the name here. Then why did you select this strategy as being appropriate for your context? So what was your reasoning for it? What are the risk factors in your community? What do you think would work better for where you are? So all of those things, sort of bringing together everything that we've done in the last 5 sessions. And then analyzing it. So which risk factors does this strategy address? Which actors need to be engaged in this strategy, and what challenges might you have? So very similar to the breakout exercise that we did today, but this time looking at deeply into your own context, what would work for you and what would work for the communities that you work with. So this is the assignment for today. Any questions on this from anybody?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Sure, Cipriano, go ahead.
Yeah, to Rubina and both to Rita as well. I'm just trying to ask, trying to understand more about which risk factor does this strategy address. What does this question mean to?
So for this, if these are the risk factors that you looked at in the previous session. So in session 4, Vinita and Rita dove deep into the causes of violence. That included the risk factors that potentially increase the chances of IPV happening. So for example, poverty, for example, alcohol use. There's quite a few examples of those risk factors in that session that were shared. So that is what we're asking here. So which of those risk factors do you think the strategy works on? And Rita, inviting you to add anything if you'd like to help explain this.
Hi, Benita, you explained it so clearly. I think, Cipriano, it doesn't have to be, I mean, don't focus only on this session of the day. You need to also look at the session we did last time with Benita, where we were mapping the risk factors at each level of the socio-ecological model, right? So what were the risk factors at individual level, and link it, like the strategies. If I would suggest you take the slides that we shared, like what we shared for the socio-ecological model as mapping the risk factors. There was a whole list, and in your groups, you also went into the groups to map the risk factors that can, create violence. IPV risk factors, there were 2 slides that Benita took us through. For example, we said maybe risk factors for individual women that could to experience violence, that could be maybe the age, they could be witnessing violence when they were children, the attitude of accepting violence, for example. And there was also a list, I remember, of risk factors on individual men. That is when you're looking at individual level. So these strategies we saw today were strategies that have proven to work at the different levels of the socio-ecological model. So for example, if we talked about addressing poor mental health, all right? And if there was a risk strategy that is, for example, depression, if depression is one of the risk factors that we have identified on one of the layers of the model, and if you think maybe the strategy we presented today, the poor mental health, can address that depression, then you can mention depression. You can, I don't know if that makes sense to you. So you have to map out what are the possible risk factors that at the layer of the socio-ecological model, and then see whether the strategy that you are identifying can be addressing that risk factor. I just picked depression and linked it to the poor mental health, but also there are psychological dysfunction, like people were saying, that can also be one of the risks that can be addressed. But also we have some risk factors we have identified in the previous session, like women access to financial support, women that can be addressed maybe by the cash transfer. So look at the strategies that we had today, pick one, and then see how it can intervene to address a certain risk factor that you can identify. So I don't know if that is clearer, Cipriano.
Okay, I think I might got the point from you both, which means we have to select the strategy first, and then we break down the risk factors or identify the risk factors.
Exactly. That is it. Pick one strategy and you work on it.
All right.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita, and thank you for asking that, Cipriano. I'm sure it's helped our other colleagues as well. So this is the take-home exercise for this week. Please share it with us by the 19th, this Sunday. It really helps us if you can share it at that time, because then it gives Rita and I a chance to, and Benita as well, it gives us a chance to review these take-homes and go through them and share. We take that opportunity to share it in the next session with everyone as well. So please do try and share it by the Sunday as much as possible. And of course, if you need any help, feel free to email Rita, Benita, or myself, and we'll help you out with any queries. As usual, yeah, you know where to find us now, and we'll also share any links to everything that we've discussed in an email after the session, including the recording for those of you who might have missed some parts.